Thanks very much for joining me, all of you. We're going to talk a little bit about garages today, which is an enormous topic. And each of you, I think, will be able to share a unique perspective on the maintenance of underground garages, how we keep an underground garage healthy, what we do in order to restore an underground garage as part of planned renovation or major repair, and what we do to restore a garage when we have an unplanned emergency. I'm wondering what impact drainage has on some of the water infiltration that we might see in an underground garage, and whether you would think that basically the drainage in an underground garage or a basement is similar in any way.
Well, the large part of the deterioration is caused by water, and that water carries with it salts from cars. And if that salt can get into the concrete with the water and to the reinforcing steel, there's your problem.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the greatest challenges we have. In identifying when you've got an issue of drainage, are there particular times of the year that you would recommend for a property manager to do some inspections?
Well, there would be regular monitoring, I'm sure, by the superintendents and other people who are in the building, property managements, staff, supers, just even people who live there might complain about a ponded area, these small bodies of water that collect, especially in the winter, right? If they notice that, they may make a comment. So that would be a good time just to do a quick walk through the garage and just determine if there is any ponding, water sitting there for days or weeks even. When the garage is washed, probably twice a year is sort of the optimum time. Again, just determine if there's any water standing on the surface of the slabs. As far as maintenance, again, just a visual thing. If drains are plugged or full of leaves and coffee cups and things, they should be cleaned out on a regular basis by the supers or the building maintenance staff. So a visual survey as often as possible to just detect if there's any issues. And if you do see a lot of ponding, then you could either call some emergency services operation like Kate's firm, or go into a more thorough study and evaluate the slopes and do elevation studies and determine where the best places are for drains and add new drains. Drains are easy to add to a garage.
I'm going to stick to the maintenance aspect of underground garages for a little bit. I'm hoping you could talk a little bit about what's necessary when it comes to maintaining ingress and egress systems for the underground garage or basements.
You have access systems for the ingress, as you mentioned, as well as egress. You have certain devices that would be important to have and essential to have in the full functioning of the door, such as motion sensors, loop detectors which are cut into the ground, air hose systems. You could even use a photo eye system that they use as well. So there are many of those that are used in that system.
Can you talk a little bit about the frequency that would be expected for maintenance of door systems?
With regard to maintenance, what the important thing would be for a door company to sit down with the manager and ascertain as to what the actual site is all about. For example, how many vehicles are in the garage? How often is the door going up and down? As you mentioned earlier as well, you said there's a main door for residents and visitors, and there could be a resident door as well. So what we're looking at is to first of all ascertain the number of vehicles and how many times that door is used, and that would determine how many times maintenance would be recommended. For very low cycle doors, where you have 50 vehicles, approximately 50 vehicles on site in the garage, you'd be looking at maybe 3 times a year. Going up to 100 vehicles in the garage 3 or 4 times a year. And then when you get to the 400, 500, 600 vehicles in a garage, you're looking approximately 6 times a year. And there are some managers who even look at 12 times per year, because it's all relative to the usage of the door.
If you are looking at the garage door operating in a townhouse complex where it's servicing a single family, you'd still recommend routine maintenance of the door?
I would suggest then that you're looking at maintenance maybe every 2 years, because the door is only going up, I would say, on average, approximately 3 or 4 times a day. You know, people going to work, coming home from work, going out at night or whatever. So you're looking 3 or 4 times a day, and I would say every 2 or 3 years, based on usage and based on that specific complex, one would then ascertain, but not more than that.
So far we've talked about systems being relatively normal, trying to identify problems before they happen. And of course not everything is planned or prepared for, which is when we call somebody like Kate.
Every emergency is completely different, and there are variations on what we would need to know as project managers. But as a standard, there will be a number of questions asked of whoever calls in. So it's important to note that it may not be the property manager. So you really need to train staff on these questions and make sure that the information is readily available to everybody.
As a project manager, how do you handle communications with the community at large?
So as a project manager, we obviously are going to work with the property manager in terms of priorities as far as the areas that may not be accessible. We'll have that discussion right on the outset of the claim. What areas need to be addressed immediately so that business can resume as normally as possible. Obviously, there will be areas that likely need to be sort of cordoned off or blocked off. And the matter of communicating that to all the unit owners is something that we can actually assist with as well. But we find written documentation is generally the best. And the reason for that is obviously it's a consistent message and can be posted throughout the building on all doors. Sometimes it's important of basically what's going on, what to expect in the next 24 hours, what to expect in the next week. There is no such thing as too much communication when it comes to these sort of situations, as long as it's consistent and the message is clear. So it is important to have a meeting with your groups before you have too much interaction with unit owners, so that they can come up with that sort of a script.
Rick, we were talking a little bit earlier about the reserve fund study, which is a really broad stroke plan for when we're going to do major repairs and replacements in our buildings, be they standalone townhouses or big high-rises. The other thing you had mentioned is the value of condition surveys and specific kinds of field studies that would inform when a project is due and when you move from some maintenance types of items, like adding some drainage or doing some crack injections in the underground garage, and move on to a larger scale planned project. Can you talk to me a little bit about those types of engineering studies and how they fit into the creation of a scope of work?
Dealing with a problem before it exists is in a lot of cases not something most people do. So the reserve fund study is a great tool. And as you know, the reserve fund study is a replacement, a document for pricing out replacements of components, carpets and roofs and boilers and so on. You don't replace a parking structure. So typically in the reserve fund study, we spread out some minor maintenance issues every 3, 4, 5 years, $5,000 or so to maintain the drainage and the traffic topping and other things that may need some maintenance type of attention over that 30 years. Doing regular maintenance on a regular basis and review of the parking structure in this case. Some management firms actually obtain services of consultants to do a monitoring program. If you want to do a more detailed study, then drag a heavy steel chain around and you can tell certain things about the condition of the traffic topic. If we do actually go to the condition survey and come up with an investigation, report, cost estimates, recommendations for what the repairs might be, it could be tens of thousands, could be hundreds of thousands. On a large garage, it could be millions of dollars on a huge parking structure that's not been maintained. So once that is established and the board knows that they might have to spend, let's say, $1 million on a major restoration, then the next step is to prepare specifications for the work. Typically in a major restoration, it's the entire waterproofing system. So you remove it, repair the concrete, re-waterproof it, and take care of painting and line painting and drains and all that stuff. So once the specs are written, then they go to tenders. They're all basically pricing, the quote, apples to apples
Right.
repair. And in that, we do have quantities for repairs, estimates of the amount of concrete to repair, if there's injection to do, length of cracks, numbers of drains to install. So that's all identified in a bid form, which could be 3, 4, 5 pages. It could be 20 items in that.
What is the best way for a property manager to explain or set out a schedule to the board that would represent the timelines in a major project when they might expect or anticipate change notices?
The more detailed an investigation, the more that you can tighten up on those unknowns. And it's not 100% accurate, because if there's asphalt or wearing course on the concrete, there's really no way to know the exact quantity for the repairs, unless you do very, very, very extensive X-raying and other things that are just, you spend $100,000 doing a survey, which is not efficient. So, no, right. So as you mentioned, when the waterproofing is removed, then we can again do another, not so much a survey, but there's a ways of determining the actual physical quantities that need to be repaired. Hopefully they're close to the bid quantity, but if not, then those wouldn't be considered changes. They were just an increase in the quantity of the work item.
And based on the price they had previously stipulated.
Correct. So you're paying for that repair at the unit rate that was bid in a competitive way. If it's
And
not,
that makes it fair and reasonable, and the board doesn't feel as though they're being taken advantage of in the middle of a project.
the only thing that changes is the quantity.
Right. If you had one thing that you could tell or ask a property manager to do that would prepare them for emergency, that would see them document and maintain well, that would see them manage major structures, particularly basements and underground garages, what would it be? One item.
I think the most important thing to discuss, and discuss often, is to actually have a plan. It's impossible, like I said, to plan for every eventuality, but communicate with your teams in the event of any kind of emergency. Here's where you go, here's who you call, and here's what you want to do to get the ball rolling. What we generally recommend is actually an emergency preparedness kit, which would have all of that information in it that they would need, that's quickly accessible and can be referenced.
That they can open up and start walking through when the emergency
Exactly,
happens.
and that everybody actually knows where that kit is located. Well, lots of times we know you put them together, but the training doesn't somehow cascade down, and it's not found in the case of an emergency. So really it is have a plan and build a relationship with a restoration contractor. I may be slightly biased in how important I think we are, but I promise there's nothing that will make you happier at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're in the basement with a foot of sewage, than watching a restoration contractor roll up with a vac truck and the supplies and people that they need to get
The
you back,
relief
right?
is unbelievable,
It is.
yes. And even from the moment of making contact with somebody that you know you can rely upon is incredible.
And we're here for questions. I mean, even generally to put together the plan. Call somebody who's going to be responding to this and walk them through, what do we need to do, who should we be calling, and just get them to work with you on the plan.
You mentioned one item, with your permission, I'd like to add to, and that would be, in addition to what Kate has mentioned as to having a plan, I think a preventive maintenance program, of course it is according to city bylaws, etc., is vital. It's imperative that property manager make sure that that is in place, number one. And following that, I think it would be as important to make sure, because this is according to the Condo Act, which states that a manager should ensure that the repairs and damage and failures of the system are repaired. So in order to make sure that everything is done and reduce liability, a property manager should make sure that the repairs are done, which are called for by the preventive maintenance report.
Similar to what we're saying here is just a review and have some kind of a maintenance program. And a simple thing is just a visual walk through the garage, and that can be done by yourself as a property manager, once every 6 months, the superintendent, or if you want to go to a little more technical side of it, to obtain the services of a contractor or a consulting firm or somebody that has a little bit of technical knowledge, saying, well, that crack is a problem.
That's great. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.